The following review of Transformers Cyberverse contains major spoilers. If you have not watched this episode yet, view at your own risk. Hello everyone, I'm Autobot Sonic the Telltale Gamer, bringing you the latest in Telltale Games, Transformers, and more. For today's review, we're going to be looking at Transformers Cyberverse Season 1, Episode 8, Terminal Velocity. Now, this episode, it's definitely better than Cube, but it's still not, like, there's things this episode does really, really well, but then there's also stuff this episode does really, really poorly, and so I'm kind of torn between, like, if this episode's, like, good or bad. Like, it's better than Cube, but not by that much, and it kind of really disappoints me, because I was really looking, this is probably, like, one of the, like, the episodes I was looking forward to seeing the most, and it's kind of sad, like, at some points, like, I'm really surprised by this episode, in the fact that, like, wow, I can't believe Hasbro did this, that's amazing, and also some parts, like, oh, wow, I can't believe Hasbro did this, that's really, really bad. So, honestly, I'm really divided about this episode, so we're gonna go over everything this episode did right and what it did wrong. So, this episode starts off with Windblade out on patrol looking for apparently some sort of Decepticon signal. This is, I guess, shortly after the events of the last episode, Cube. So, when she finds nothing, she decides to go head back to Bumblebee, who is bored, just sitting around a ship. So, he decides to go ahead and enter his own memories by himself in terms of hoping to uncover some fun memories. So he uncovers a memory of him and Hot Rod, who in this continuity is like one of his best friends. They end up taking a vacation to Velocitron. Now, for those of you who didn't see my review of last week's episode Cube, Velocitron is essentially another one of Cybertron's 13 colony worlds, which also appeared in the IDW comics, and first really appeared in, it's like, well, Caminus first appeared in the IDW comics. Velocitron was actually, like, really the only other, like, mainstay, like, Transformers planets. Like, it first appeared in the Unicron trilogy, then it was referenced a bit in the Alliance continuity with Blur and Rescue Bots and Robots in Disguise, and then it became a colony planet in the IDW comics before it appeared here in Cyberverse. So, essentially, also based on the fact that Hot Rod and Bumblebee have Autobot patches, and the fact that Bumblebee talks in this flashback, I assume this takes place sometime in between flashbacks from Megatron as My Hero. So this is probably after when Bumblebee and Optimus go to speak to Megatron about trying to stop the war, but before the events of Bumblebee losing his voice box. So in this, like, flashback, Hot Rod and Bumblebee take a vacation to Velocitron, where they meet up with another one of Bumblebee's friends, Blur, who in this continuity is a Velocitronian, and just like when they arrive, Blur and Hot Rod are obviously, like, getting, like, really, like, tense to each other. Like, they're, like, you see, they're both rivals. In fact, they're both, like, believe they're the fastest, and so Bumblebee decides to have them, like, compete, like, the three of them compete in, like, a race. So the way Velocitron works varies between continuities. In the IEW continuity, it seems to, like, it focuses, Velocitron focused, like, it's usually the same as the fact that it's home to a lot of, like, more speedster Transformers, and so, but it varies. Like in the IEW comics, Velocitron was it was essentially like this giant city that was constantly moving to outrun, like, a solar flare that was constantly encircling the planet. And then in Cyberverse, Velocitron is essentially this planet made almost nearly entirely out of racetracks for Transformers to enjoy. So at this point, Blur decides to take Hot Rod and Bumblebee out on one of the new racetracks. I should point out, we also finally learn Blur and Hot Rod's voice actors. Blur is voiced by J.C. Ernst, who hasn't done anything, and Hot Rod is voiced by Travis Arts, who again is essentially like a nobody, with, like, this being their first role. So again, Cyberverse, with the exception of, like, Mark Thompson as Megatron, this really continues the trend of Cyberverse's voice essentially just being, like, brand new talent and all that. So anyway, while this is happening, Bumblebee, before they begin on their race, Bumblebee notices this one Cybertronian who's, like, seems like he for all intents and purposes, he's essentially just a recolored Wheeljack. You can tell, obviously, he's basically just Wheeljack, but with, like, a black and gold color scheme instead of his red, white, and green color scheme. So he's carrying, like, these two pods, and you notice that, like, one of his hands is, like, all rusted up, but Bumblebee tries to tell Hot Rod and Blur about this before but then they start arguing again, so they decide to go on a race and ignore Bumblebee. Meanwhile, as Bumblebee is reliving this memory, Windblade returns back to Bumblebee, only to find that two Seekers have started to head towards, like, they have found Bumblebee, have found their ship and are trying to sneak in, and it's not Thundercracker and Novastorm, who we last saw in Episode 5, Whiteout. These are two new Seekers. We have Acid Storm and Thrust. Now, if you remember my video talking about, like, all the different characters confirmed for Transformers Cyberverse, Acid Storm was one of them, but Thrust is a brand new character who originally in the G1 continuity, and I think in the IW continuity too, he was a Conehead, just like Ramjet and Dirge from last week's episode, Cube, but this one, he's just a regular red Seeker, similarly to Novastorm and Thundercracker, where Novastorm's pink and Thundercracker's blue. Also, Acid Storm in this continuity is a femme, and I was really surprised by this, seeing as how her design is very masculine. If you go back to, like, her design that was shown in the original, on Cyberverse official website, like, Acid Storm looks very masculine, and just, like, I did not expect her to be a femme, so that's, I just, like, thought that was really interesting. So anyway, Windblade manages to stun them and noticing that Bumblebee is in the middle of a memory, takes over the ship and tries to fly it away from them, as Acid Storm and Thrust take chase, with Slipstream joining the two shortly after. As Windblade struggles to do this, we then cut back into Bumblebee's memory of him racing with Hot Rod and Blur. So the two end up being halfway through the track, in which at this point, like, again, Hot Rod and Blur are always, like, at each other's throats. Blur, funnily enough, calls Hot Rod as, like, a nickname Hot Shot, which of course is a reference to the character Hot Shot from the Unicron trilogy. Hot Shot was essentially the Bumblebee / Hot Rod of the Unicron trilogy, and he's also going to be the main character in the upcoming Rescue Bots Academy cartoon that will be coming next year. So I thought that was a nice little nod to how even, like, some Transformers fans confuse Hot Rod and Hot Shot together. Anyway, at this point, that Blur suggests that they go on another racetrack, so they do, only to find out that there's a dead end, which Blur uses to his advantage to win the race against Bumblebee and Hot Rod. So while Hot Rod and Blur argue more, Bumblebee notices a drone ship, crashing out of the sky, heading straight towards them. So Blur, Hot Rod, and Bumblebee are just able to outrun it when it crashes into the track, and they realize that the whole ship is emanating like some sort of rust it instantly disintegrates the track. So Blur, Hot Rod, and Bumblebee have to outrun the rust as it disintegrates the entire track. So as they're running away, we cut back to Windblade, who is again still trying to outrun Acid Storm, Thrust, and Slipstream. So it's at this point she ends up figuring out how to use the Seeker ship's missiles to knock out Acid Storm and Thrust, and then is almost able to get away from Slipstream as she tries to break the ship's cockpit in an attempt to pull Windblade out, but she manages to do, like, a barrel roll which knocks Slipstream off the ship, but she still continues to chase her and Bumblebee. So Windblade decides to pilot the ship directly up straight into space, and Slipstream, though, is still able to catch up to her for a little bit until her engines start to short out from I assume, like, just like how fast it's going, because Windblade in the Seeker ship is going a lot faster than Slipstream. So eventually Slipstream's engines fail and she ends up crashing back down to Earth, and we don't know if she's dead or not. I assume she's probably still alive, but who knows. Anyway, after that we cut back to Bumblebee's memory, in which Hot Rod, and Blur have managed to outrun the rust for a while and take shelter in a little base that Blur had made on one of the tracks. It's at this point that Bumblebee realizes that earlier, before he and Hot Rod and Blur went on the race, he saw before seeing the one mech that had the containers and the rusty body, he noticed that a bunch of plants had recently been getting destroyed by this rust disease virus called the Plague of Rust, which essentially is a very, very very volatile, acid, rust disease that instantly can tear through anything. This is a reference to a thing that was planned to be used in Transformers Prime. It's going to be put in the Alignment continuity called the Plague, the Cosmic Rust, which is essentially basically the same thing. It's a giant rust disease that obliterates entire planets. So it's at this point that Bumblebee and Hot Rod realize they have to get back to Cybertron, but Blur's kind of hesitant about leaving because he doesn't want to abandon Velocitron, which has been his home for his whole life. But at this point, a random mech who's half infested with Rust comes in and nearly infects Bumblebee, but he manages to knock him back before the Rust completely disintegrates him, Infinity War style. And sure enough, Blur's base get dissolved as the three of them quickly decide to head back to the space bridge where they all came in. So it's at this point the whole racetrack is disintegrating, so they have to make a jump to the space bridge controls. They all make it, and as they're about to take the space bridge and leave, Bumblebee realizes that they can't leave the space bridge open or else the Rust will follow them back to Cybertron and destroy it along with Velocitron. But then it's at this point where the spoilers that I mentioned at the beginning of this video come in. So essentially, it's at this point Bumblebee realizes that one of them has to stay behind to shut down the space bridge to make sure that the Plague of Rust does not get through the space bridge and destroy Cybertron along with Velocitron. It's at this point that Blur reveals he has been infected with the Plague of Rust, in which it caught his hand as he, Hot Rod, and Bumblebee were jumping off the racetrack onto the space bridge controls. So in his last moments before Blur is completely taken over by the Rust, he manages to run over to the dashboard, to the space bridge controls, and shuts it down before Hot Rod and Bumblebee in. So they manage to get in right before the space bridge closes, and then Blur ends up getting completely covered in rust and dies. And it's just, wow, like, I can't believe, like, we actually, like, not even we saw Megatron whip out Bumblebee's voice box in Megatron's My Hero. We actually have Blur straight on die, full on Mr. Stark. I don't feel so good. He got the Infinity War treatment so badly. Just look, he just turns straight to dust. And honestly, I was super shocked that we actually saw like a character in Cyberverse die, no less Blur, one of the main characters, like he's got like one of the main toy lines in Cyberverse. To have him die, I just think that's incredible. That, like, I'm so shocked that Cyberverse actually went that far to kill off Blur. So anyway, Bumblebee and Hot Rod escape Velocitron as the Plague of Rust kills Blur and the rest of Velocitron, and that's pretty much where the episode ends. And then just ends rather quickly with Bumblebee waking up from the memory, and that's it. Okay, guys, so this is another thing I discovered. I just thought about when I was like right before I started to edit this video. Actually, I gotta give Cyberverse like another pro here for putting this topic into it, and in regards specifically about the whole idea when the mech that Bumblebee sees outside of when he first arrives at Velocitron, like before he, Hot Rod, and Blur go on the race, that for all intents and purposes we assume is carrying the Plague of Rust that destroys Velocitron. Now, I gotta just give Cyberverse props to this, because I don't know if this is officially like what happened, but to me what it seems like what happened is that apparently this guy that has the Plague of Rust carrying the rust in the boxes, I believe he may be like a Decepticon doing what is equivalent to like a suicide bombing on Velocitron, which he infected himself with the Plague of Rust so that he could kill Cybertron. Because we know that the Autobot Decepticon War is going on at this time, as Bumblebee along with Hot Rod and Blur have their Autobot patches. So just thinking about, I think that's really that's really dark subject matter, like to initially basically have Cyberverse basically cover basically the Transformers equivalent of like a terrorist attack, assuming this is the Decepticons doing like basically infecting one of their own with the Plague of Rust to destroy Velocitron. And considering that Bumblebee sees the report about several other planets being destroyed by the Plague of Rust, I think that it could be very possible that the Decepticons were doing some sort of like terrorist attacks, that they were like infecting their own with the Plague of Rust and sending them out to destroy planets. And if that is the case that Cyberverse is doing, I gotta give them huge props for handling such like a dark subject like that. And like, it doesn't, like, you don't think about it much, but just thinking about it, man, that is really dark, and I gotta give props to Hasbro for that. Now we're gonna get on to the cons of this episode, and boy, there are, like, as much as, like, there are cons with this episode. So, first off, I'd like to say, again, even though as, like, shocking as it was to see Blur die, I can't say that I'm really happy with Blur's death. Now, if this happened maybe like towards the very end of the season, I would be fine with that. But like we didn't we didn't get to see a lot of Blur. So like, but when Bumblebee introduces Hot Rod to Blur, he says that he's one of his closest friends, and yet though we as the viewer don't get that much time to know Blur. We literally see him throughout this entire episode, and then he just dies at the end. We don't have really any time to get to know him because we only really like see his like interactions with Hot Rod. He doesn't even interact with Bumblebee that much. He just argues with Hot Rod the entire time, and I guess like it just I was more shocked just that they killed Blur off, and like it's kind of sad me knowing that, like, because Blur is one of my favorite characters across all Transformers series, but just to see like Cyberverse Blur die like this, and especially after we've just had another version of Blur die this year. I'm not gonna say which version of Blur died because I don't want to spoil another continuity of Transformers, but just know another Blur did die this year, and I don't want to spoil what kind of Blur that is. So anyway, and that Blur's death was done a lot better than this Cyberverse Blur's death. So I really wish that they gave us more time, and even like with Bumblebee, we don't see him like mourn Blur at all. Hot Rod mourns Blur more than Bumblebee does, and Hot Rod only knew Blur for about as long as we did. We see like he's like really like, proud of Blur, like for being like so brave to sacrifice himself to save Hot Rod and Bumblebee, and like all we see is just Bumblebee like look a little bit sad as Blur dies before he leaves in the space bridge of Hot Rod. And then when he wakes up though from the flashback with Bumblebee with Windblade, he doesn't seem fazed by it at all. It's so weird. Like I think it would have been cool like maybe we saw like Bumblebee like after that memory be so shocked, and like Windblade would want to know what happened, so he saw like, oh, I saw Blur and he died, and Windblade would be like trying to console him. That would be good. But no, it just. And also, and that leads to my second point, the ending of this episode. This ending, it just ended so abruptly. Like, the episode literally ends, like, it ends with, before we see, Velocitron die, and Velocitron and Blur die, and Hot Rod and Bumblebee escape, it ends with, like, Windblade and escaping Slipstream by flying up into space, and so Slipstream crashes back down to Earth. And then, Bumblebee just wakes up from the dream that, Windblade, not the dream, Windblade wakes up from his memory, and that's literally how it is. Literally just Windblade and Bumblebee are still in space, and that's how the episode ends. It kind of feels like just like there was a second part planned or something, but just like it ends so weirdly. And I gotta say, like even though other episodes they ended like suddenly, they felt more natural endings. This ending didn't feel natural at all. As soon as I saw the credits pop up, I'm like, wait, that's it? Literally, Blur dies in the last like 20 seconds of the episode. I gotta say that I'm just not that big of a fan of it. And so that was my review of Transformers Cyberverse Season 1, Episode 8, Terminal Velocity. Now, this little final verdict I've actually recorded just like right before I started editing together this video, after like getting some time to think about like the episode. Actually, I originally gave this episode a 7.5 out of 10, but I think I'm actually going to bump it up to an 8.5 out of 10, mostly because I'm not going to fault Hasbro for killing off Blur with little build-up, because I'm not, without spoiling anything, Hasbro did this prior with a major character in Transformers Prime, in which they actually introduced this character in the first episode of the series, and then they advertised him prior to the show starting as a main character, but then they killed him off in the first episode, very similarly, like with little to no build-up. So I'm gonna give Hasbro a little leeway with that. That's just my personal preference. So I'm not going to fault Hasbro for just introducing Blur only to kill him off. I'm not gonna do that. So I'm gonna stick with my gut and give Cyberverse Season 1, Episode 8, Terminal Velocity an 8.5 out of 10. Just like I said for Blur's death, I'm not gonna take off for that, but also because of it handling this really dark subject matter, or perhaps it's something that's basically doing terrorist attacks on like suicide bombings on other planets. I think that's really, really dark for a kids show to do, and I think I gotta applaud Hasbro for handling that subject matter. And but still though, like this episode, I would have brought it to a 9 out of 10 because of that. But again, the ending was kind of rushed, and I wasn't a fan of the B plot. But because of that, this handling this dark subject matter, the fact that I'm not taking points anymore off for Blur's rushed death, I'm going to give this episode an 8.5 out of 10. I'm not sure if Blur's going to be coming back, like maybe Blur's not really dead, or if he is dead, maybe we'll be seeing more of Blur, like maybe there'll be flashbacks prior to this that show like Bumblebee's like earlier interactions with Blur. That would be cool if we did see that, but I don't know, like if this is the end of Blur, damn man, rip. I wish we got more time to know you. Damn. But anyway, yeah, that's gonna be it for this review. I'll be back this soon with episode 9, Shadow Striker. If you like this review, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys later.